The farming part of Farming Sims has worked in almost exactly the same way in every game with a farming mechanic since it first appeared in Harvest Moon 1. The process of planting seeds and watering them until they grow is something that you could call a solved mechanic. You can add extra steps like adding fertilizer or making it so that there are certain areas of land that are better or worse for certain crops, but the pattern of planting, watering, and waiting will always be there. What tools you use, how you're able to move around, how quickly time passes, how and if you're able to make money, and how you interact with the characters in the game are all things that change from game to game, but usually not by too much. We don't expect that we'll be able to make up something new and exciting for a basic farming mechanic, so we want to see what we can do differently with all those other aspects, but doing things differently comes with some risks. We're Stump and Stem, a programmer and artist duo, and we're making a farming and cooking game called Aardvark Agriculture, which we don't know whether or not it's going to be fun. The way Harvest Moon style farming sims work is generally already considered fun, but messing with the standard mechanics of those games puts us at risk of turning it into something that's boring or a slog. So what is there to do? Our best idea to figure out what will make this game fun to play is to make a minimum viable product. For us, that means making the most basic possible version of the game, which isn't pretty, but it is playable and complete enough that the whole daily routine exists. Once we have that, we'll hand the game off to people we trust to give us good feedback and iterate on the game accordingly. Our path to making that minimum viable product is outlined here, but before I get too ahead of things, let me explain how we got to this. The general gameplay loop we have in mind is to farm, then cook your harvest, and deliver the food to the people in town who will give you more seeds to farm with. So, our minimum viable product needs to have basic farming, basic cooking, and basic town interactions. To do basic farming, you need to be able to till the soil, plant seeds, be able to water those seeds, have crops that grow from them, and be able to harvest all those crops, all while time passes, which is the thing that moves your daily farming routine forward. To cook, you need to be able to store those crops into some kind of inventory, access a special cooking menu, select specific items that you want to cook with, and have those items be converted into some kind of dish which goes back into your inventory. Finally, to interact with the town, you need to be able to enter the town menu, select where you want to go, enter dialogue with the person there, and exchange the food you cooked for new seeds. And in the midst of this, there are probably many steps that I'm forgetting. Suddenly, this game that was supposed to be simple and easy doesn't feel simple in the slightest. In fact, it seems more like we're making 3 separate games in one. But it's a little easier if you remember that at the barest minimum, you only need to be able to grow one thing, cook one thing, and trade one thing. After all that works, it's a little more manageable to add on the complexity later. For farming, the first thing you need to be able to do is till the soil, so Stump got right to work on that. Typically in farming sims, and in real life, you till the soil to disturb the ground that you want to plant seeds in. In real life, this is to integrate them in the soil, but in a video game it's both for the illusion of farming and to designate what place you want to be able to plant things. Plants can grow any way they want to in real life, but in video games the crops that you can harvest are almost universally placed on a grid. This is for ease of organization and visual tidiness, but I think more than anything it's done this way because this is how it's always been done since the very first Harvest Moon game came out in 1996. And the reason why that game works that way is because it used rigid sprite tile sets, and so any tilled land or crop had to be exactly the size of one tile. This way of operating has its benefits. For one, it's the standard that people are used to, so people who have farmed in video games before will probably know what to do immediately. It's also visually very clean, and very easy to plan out and strategize your field. But on the other hand, it's very rigid and often looks pretty unnatural having a bunch of obvious squares sitting in the middle of an empty field, so we wanted to try something new. In this game, your body itself is a tool. Rather than have an inventory where you store a different tool for every single action you want to take, you do things manually. This translates to your watering can and inventory being physical items that you have to pick up and carry around whenever you need them. When it comes to tilling, that means that you're using your bare hands, or in this case, your claws. The idea here is that you're digging out trails that things can be planted in. Once you find where you want to start, you lean down and start slowly walking backwards as you dig, and the places that you would be able to plant a crop spawn in wherever there's room. With this style of tilling, you could even draw pictures in the dirt if you wanted to. Eventually, we want the paths to connect seamlessly. Until we figure out the shaders to make a tidy trail, we have these circles, which are spread out this way because otherwise the number of circles that got spawned in was a little comical. Once we have a few more mechanics in, like crop growing, we'll be able to test this better and see if we like how it feels or not. There's a very real chance that we decide it doesn't work and end up going back to the traditional grid style, but we're not going to settle without giving it a good shot first. Speaking of crop growing, that's not in yet. In order for things to really be able to grow, we need a system that keeps track of the time. What we have in place now is something that ticks down time until the end of the day and then freezes once time would end. The numbers correspond to the times that you would generally expect, and the light moves and changes color in the sky as the day goes on. It still needs some work though. The rate of time passage is programmed to be easily changed. We'll definitely need to modify it later when the game is closer to complete, so the game runs at a speed that's comfortable but not outright boring. The usual 15 to 20 minute days you get in modern games like Stardew Valley would be a little excessive here. We'll also add a menu option for players to change the speed to whatever they like best as an accessibility feature in the finished game. With those two things started, our road to the minimum viable product looks something like this. We've got a long way to go before all the pieces come together, but it's a great start. If you've been keeping up with us as we've been making these, thank you so much for sticking around. And if you're new here, you can see the start of our journey at this video over here. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to telling you what we've made next.